Now we are joined by Austin Aigbe, Senior Program Officer, Center for Democracy and Development, to talk to us about a story that got us shocked. It's a huge revelation, a report that was released yesterday by the CDD, Democracy Watch report, in particular talking about how Nigeria has fared in the past 20 years since the return of democracy in 1999. And we saw something that was very interesting this morning. First of all, let me welcome you on the
Thank
show.
you so much. But you can go directly to what you saw.
Yeah. Over 13,000 Nigerians, were killed by security officials in the last 10 years. Going by that figure, it means that virtually every year you have, in the last 10 years, every year at least 1,000 Nigerians are killed by security officials.
So if you make it in that kind of blanket word, it will look as if there are targeted killings. These are part of extrajudicial killing, torture, human rights abuses that accumulate into that number. It's not a situation where security personnel went on the street on rampage and just killing people. It included all of the crises in the northeast, the ones in the southeast, the southwest, and all of across the federation. Only the northeast alone, with the war against terrorism, you imagine what would have happened there. Those numbers added up to that 13,000 plus. It's a data set we have consistently monitored and putting faces to those numbers, not just in numbers per se, but having that you are able to verify each number. Actually, the number would have been more, but when you cannot verify them, you cannot say it. People will say, oh, we used to have 5 people in this family, two were killed. Okay, what are their names? What happened to them? If we cannot trace it to the source and eventually what happened, it didn't add up to that number. We didn't just want to just pull out numbers unnecessarily.
So these numbers were verified and they were actual people that you investigated? Actual
names of people cumulatively. CDD, Human Rights Watch, of course, other organizations who does the same thing. We were watching each other. So when these pull up numbers, we want to go and investigate it. So when we pull out numbers, they also try to verify those numbers. The global rights of this world and all of it. So there are faces, names, actual names of those numbers. Not in this regime, so we don't look at it. In the last, if I say 2011, up to this moment, the killings by extrajudicial wise, detention, people who went to detention, you can't find anymore. The ones in Anambra State, for example, had a huge number. You would imagine how. Why would a state like that in the southeast have that kind of huge number? But the revelation came after when the NSAS probe was going on. That there were people who were arrested, taken to detention, and never came back. They are not in the detention room, and they are not in the world. So where are they? They've been buried somewhere. Faces. Their mothers and fathers continue to find them. They can't find them.
Yeah. Look at the larger picture, the essence of this report. We're looking at 20 years of democracy in Nigeria, the return, uninterrupted democracy as we call it. Some say perhaps civil rule or so. I've also heard you in the report referring to civil rule. Perhaps you would elaborate on that later. But then, overall, what did you find with regards to democracy in Nigeria? Is it working for Nigeria?
Well, let me begin by saying that democracy is a work in progress. There is never a strong democracy. Even the American had what they called the insurgents recently in Capitol Hill, where you would have imagined that, why would that happen in America? That people went to the seat of power, to the seat of democracy, the symbol of authority, the symbol of democracy, which is the lawmaking arm of God. That's the symbol of democracy, because those are the representation, the representative guarding a place to advocate, make law for the good governance of a country. You see people en masse in a stampede, and we know today that people were killed, that people went there with guns. That is America, a democracy that you will say is very old. There is no old democracy. There is no young democracy. I also don't want to use the word that Nigeria is a young democracy. No, there are 90-year-old people in this country who are poor, and there are 20-year-old who are rich. So it's not about your age, it's the way you operate your democracy. Back to Nigeria. Since 1999, when we returned to democracy, fine, people were so optimistic that coming from the military regime, coming from the Decree 2s of this world, the Decree 4 of this world, where free speech, you cannot say anything against the government. In fact, you dare not say anything at all. So the decree allows government to detain you without prosecution. And that we've left those era. The days of General Muhammadu Buhari of this world, the days of General Babangida of this world, the days of General Abacha of this world, moving from those era where an individual would just be missing. A media organization reported cases, and the next thing you can't find the journalist. Missing. That no trace. The way the journalist was not arrested, but missing. Because there's a difference between arrest and missing. So, where is Kunle? He was here yesterday. Where is he? You can't find him. Just like the case that happened to the journalist recently, even though that case is still on, suddenly gone missing. We know about the Delegiwa of this world, who got a letter, and that was it. We know of cases, countless number of cases in the military regime. But the moment the democratic regime was inaugurated, there was a high hope. Oh, we are going to have free speech. We are going to have human rights. Nigerians are going to respect our rights and all of that. And we saw that with the Constitution, that the Constitution provides certain bases of rights. Right to liberty, right to freedom of association, right to all of those rights. And there was that hope. But between 1999 and date, all of those hope had gone down. Nigeria was rated 2013 as the worst country where media was abused. So the country continued to decline in terms of democratic architecture, in terms of strengthening this model. Right now, if you are engaged in political dissent, you are in trouble in the present day Nigeria. Few years ago, those who were on the other side, who were accusing the government of in power, are suddenly now took power and now realize that, oh, we didn't know that this is the way it is. As my lecturer told me some years ago, he said, you don't understand. There's a difference when you sit on that side and you sit on this side. And he told me 6 and 9 is not the same. He wrote 6 on the ground and I was seeing 9. And he told me, where can you see? I said, I see 9. He said, no, it's 6. So we got into argument. So we changed the dynamics and he came on this side. So I went on the other side and I saw the 6. So he was seeing 9. He told me that when you are on this side, there are things you can never see. That when you now get on the inside, the whole narrative is different. That is what explains why those who were on this side, who were shouting rights abuse, who were shouting poverty, who were shouting corruption, suddenly got on the other side, they see a different figure. They forgot what they did, and they were on the street. Now they don't want people on the street in the same democracy.
Okay, is it about the structure? Is it about the actors? Or is it about, the environment?
Structure, I don't want to percentile them, but let me put percentage. Structure is the greatest challenge of this country. Back to the US model I just talked about. What dealt with that Capitol Hill attack was the structure. Otherwise, if Donald Trump was a Nigerian, he would have been president for life. But the structure kept him. The system, kept him. And everyone, including members of his own party, said, no, we can't do this. We can't. And everyone stood on the path of justice and progress. Fast forward to Nigeria. Because our structure is so weak that in Nigeria we have strong men, strong women. In 2009, Obama was talking to people in Ghana. He refused to come to Nigeria, but it was in Ghana in 2009. He said Africa's challenge is that there are too many strong men and weak institutions. One man or one woman comes into a system. If that fellow is bad, the system goes bad. If that fellow is good, it becomes good. That is why a bit of digressing. If you look at women political representation, you need a strong man to then appoint women. And that's why we can say that, 2011, we have more women 27, we had more women. What has happened? If the will of the person in power cannot guarantee that, it goes down. The same thing is happening. Until we strengthen our systems, this institution, when that we don't build system around individuals. The greatest challenge of Nigeria today is that power, everything power about this country resides in one individual, the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. I know that after God is government, but in the context of Nigeria, it becomes worse that when power and everything reside in one individual, the system can never work because that system is then subject to that individual.
How do we strengthen this structure that we are talking about? For instance, some people have said, look, in our laws, there are certain clauses. In fact, most recently, we are hearing that the House of Representatives kicked out a bill that was meant to give Nigerians the power to demand accountability from their government. There are certain provisions, rights in the Constitution that you cannot sue, you cannot go to court for, and all of that.
Those rights are not justiciable.
Are they problematic to this structure that we are talking about?
So the Constitution itself is a problem. That's where the problem starts from. When you put rights, right to food, you put all of those sweet, chapter 2, chapter 4, and you say these are Nigerians, these are what you need. And then you go to court and say, no, they can't be justified. So now let's create another law to ensure that they are justified. You say no. Until we adjust to say when you have written down rules, follow them to the letter. When freedom of association is guaranteed by the Constitution and someone uses another act, internet falsehood they wanted to come up with, social media bill they wanted to come up with, or you use the Cybercrime Act to then say, yes, there's freedom of association, but Terrorism Act will not allow you to gather because we feel that you are discussing terrorism. You undermine the very grand norm of the country, which is the Constitution. The Constitution empowers every Nigerian. But that right, also, although you are going to ask the next question, is that where your right ends. That's what right. But that right, first of all, enjoy it. When you cannot enjoy that right, it becomes a fundamental problem. And that is where we are. So when the Constitution empowers the police and then gives the police structure that for you to have a police IG, it must be appointed by a president. A president appoints the INEC chair. The president, this is an executive position guaranteed by the Constitution, allowed. That's part of the issues. If a president appoints the commissioners of INEC, the president has interest. Don't forget the conflict of interest we always talk about. The president is the one to appoint the Chief Justice of the Federation, even though on recommendation of the NGC. But he appoints. You then see, are we not? So the president that went through an election that the people voted for, is that now the one doing all of this recommendation. That does not mean that's not the way it is in the United States. But because of our weak system, we've got to find a way to put bulwark in a way that curtails certain of those actions. We were at a time when the president submitted the names of his aide to be a national commissioner. And we are wondering, why? This is your personal aide that we all know. Elsewhere, or in, I don't know, I said there's no strong democracy, maybe elsewhere, in stronger democracy, that will not happen.
Is it a case of perhaps sitting down to look at this democracy we are copying? Because some say, it doesn't suit our contemporary realities. We take, from the United States, for instance, and other democratic states, hook, line, and sinker. We need to tinker with it to suit our current realities. Do you agree with this submission?
Partly, no, but partly again, you may want to say yes, because we've copied without knowing what we actually copied. Somebody was writing an exam in an examination hall, and it was copied from another fellow. He forgot, he copied the matriculation number and copied everything. So that would be wrong to copy without truly understanding the dynamics. However, the reason I said no, in most parts of Nigeria, what we now call Nigeria today, Nigerian state of today, are made up of people who have democratic tenets in their regimes. In the southeast, for example, you need to run you need to, in fact, you run election, so to say, maybe not kind of election we have now. In the Northeast, the feudal system, in fact, the caliphate system, there are certain autocratic, democratic norms. Yes, there are autocratic, that the king has the power of life and death. But that's what we now also have. The president has the power of life and death. But there was certain conditionality where people meet. There was that meeting already, which means it has some level of democratic tenets. So what we need to do is to make a civil or civic system, what Peter Aigbe will call the civic and the primordial culture. What we did was we copied all of the civic culture without necessarily aligning with our primordial system, wherein those in the rural area or in the villages, village system was how we run our system. Those in the rural area or in the villages who make laws, because you have to go to the village square to take a decision. Even the king, once the village square have taken a decision, it must be implemented by the guards of the king. But today, we have now built up a wall around this actor making this decision, and we took them away from these villages and bring them to a city center and build a wall around them that if you are going to the National Assembly, you can't even get in. Do you know in National Assembly, that place you have the ark, that, I don't know what they call it, that symbol, is supposed to be a venue for protest. How many people have access to that place? In fact, you are pushed out by security forces. You never get access. That place is where you submit petition.
Directly.
That's directly. That was what that place was meant for, built for in 1999. Recognizing that people, these are the representative of the people, they have to submit petition. So you go there, you drop your petition, address it to your honorable member, your senator. But that doesn't happen now. It doesn't.
How many people even know that that's what the purpose of that place is?
Because those who took power eventually realized that if you allow people to be talking, shut them up. It's better they don't talk, because they talk will be in trouble, because they are going to be empowered. And in fact, they're already empowered. And before 1999, it was the civil society that fought for democracy. A lot of members of society killed journalists, media, killed.
All right. Now, are we learning lesson in our journey of democracy from 1999 to date? A classic example, recently, the hashtag #EndSARS issue. There was a report in that respect that still remains controversial, based on what different quarters are saying, about the report and all of that. But let's look at the context of the protest itself. What we know so far is that we had unarmed Nigerians who were holding Nigerian flags, who were singing the national anthem, and who have been said to not constitute any form of threat, and then we had deployment of the military, in those things, in those scenes. At least those are settled facts. What have we learned from the reactions that we have seen, on the #EndSARS report?
You said they were not considered threat. So let me prove it to you beyond reasonable doubt. Our lawyers will say they considered threat to those bourgeois because they were occupying a place where they were collecting money. So a day two without that collection was a threat to those individuals. But they were constituted threat to no Nigerian public. Even though people argue that they could have been more organized in a way, that there were pregnant women who wanted to access the hospital and all of that. So let's put that aside.
I'm actually coming to that.
Okay, you're coming exactly. So I'm quickly going to address that. So this is it. We haven't learned anything. The #EndSARS protest was not about police per se. It started with police brutality. The police responded. The president responded. SARS was bound, and all of the structure. Part of the demand of #EndSARS was police welfare, which means people realizing that the police welfare was down. When we criticize police of taking arms on the road and all of that, taking bribe on the road, we've also forget to ask certain questions. How much does a constable earn? How much is truly the money? The policeman buys his own belt, his own uniform. It's everything you see on him kitted. Apparently, the only thing he doesn't buy may be the gun. What you need is a uniform, not necessarily the gun. If a police officer that we respect, that's supposed to be a symbol of authority, is not looking for money to be kitted properly, and salary is not enough for him or her, it definitely needs to meet ends meet by whichever way. And that is what has happened to the Nigerian police force. The Police Act 2020 is aimed to resolve those challenges, including setting up grants. Don't forget, the Police Act of 2020 is also a product of agitation by the Nigerian public. So EndSARS was not to throw the baby and the bathwater away. It was to fix the system. And it gradually went into what they call end bad governance and all of the hashtag that went in. But it was somehow when people went to tell Mr. President that the thing was against him, I would never have assumed that Mr. President will come up and say they wanted to remove me from office. That was never close to the agitation. And that is why the denial is still on today. The panel sat, produced a report, whereas we're now here, no, maybe it's fake, it's not, it's this. For me, if I was in the federal government or advising the federal government, I will humbly tell the president, there is nothing wrong to say I'm sorry. The man that say I'm sorry, even though he's right, is wise. Let's get this thing out. Let's put it behind me. Let's put it behind us. That never again will this kind of action happen. Never again will people on a peaceful assembly be attacked with security forces.
Okay.
With live bullets, not rubber bullets.
Okay. In your report now, do you see a correlation between the condition of our security officials and the level of brutality that we see, the way in which they relate with members of the public? Do you see a correlation between
Very strong correlation, because the militarization of the era of military rule has not been pulled out from certain of those, again, rules. For the very first time last year, we had a police rule that has now changed. So they were still operating with a rule set by the colonial master of 1948 that came in with the military. So those rules were still guiding them. So we are now in civil rule, but we are operating military rule. We are not in civil regime or civil rule, but we are operating military regime. So the document that help you, those torture that is embedded in Police Act, that allow electrification, that allow block work and all of those things, tear gassing and all, they were in the military regime rule. But that rule had not changed. You are still operating it. There's a strong correlation. The way our operators of this rule and the system works. So when you see a typical police officer, there was a documentary of the police college in Lagos. If you watch that documentary, every Nigerian should pull money together to improve Nigerian police force. There is nothing wrong, all of us Nigerians putting 100 naira on the table to say we need to improve the police force. Those who are recruited into the police force, the kind of agony they go through, that's not recruitment, for Christ's sake. That's not.
Right. Talking about democracy, it comes with the costs, just like we're talking about now. The freedoms, and so on, the rights, and so on. And then we are beginning to see manifestations of people, trying to actualize these rights from, politically motivated secessionist agendas or, threats and so on and so forth, to even the rising insecurity we are seeing today in Nigeria. So I would say substantially, has to go with, part of the price we have to pay for democracy. If it were a military regime, it would have been a different thing altogether. How do we reconcile these issues?
I love when you use the word comparing the democracy of today with people speaking out and then the military where dissent was never the issue. Now, let's try to look at what has happened. Abacha was a military ruler. When there was an election, all the political party candidates adopted him as a candidate to be president.
The 1 million man march.
There was a 1 million man march by Daniel Kanu, or whatever his name is. But there was also a 10 million man march in Lagos, organized by Gani Fawemi. Democracy allows you to air your view and not keep it in. That's one of the strengths that democracy has. When you talk about secessionist movement, democracy calls for dialogue. Okay, fine. What are the issues? Oh, you talk about marginalization. All right, come, let's talk. Let's settle this issue. Marginalization is the issue. You say yes. What led to terrorism? Did we have terrorism before? Was it not the same, the current president, Muhammadu Buhari, who dealt with Metiseni group? Was that not in the 80s? Was that not in quote a terrorist group? When we mishandle an issue and it gets off our hand, we blame it on democracy. The Kabirus of this world wasn't all about in quote Boko Haram terrorist group. No, that was not the ideology. Now look at the Shiites of this world now. Each time they're on the street protesting, you've turned them to a terrorist organization. Until the court yesterday pronounced, 2 days ago, pronounced bandit, the government was hesitant in pronouncing those bandits terrorist group. And then you use soft handling. By the time it gets off hand, you blame it on democracy. Democracy does not harbor laziness, let me put it that way, or gaps. The moment insurgency group started, look at two governments, democracy. In the Niger Delta, there was a militant group, fully armed. What would have turned to oil for arms? Arms were coming to Niger Delta strongly. Expatriates were running away. Our oil exploration came down almost to zero. There was a president. Who dialogue? Who came in? Come on, guys, let's sit down. Today, the militants in the Niger Delta suddenly just fizzled out. The same democratic regime. There was another regime, the same democratic regime. Call them quickly. What are the issues? Discuss. Okay, fine. When people blame Gumi at some point, okay, fine. Maybe because of the exposure and all of that. It is not too late. And there are certain comments you need to read in between the lines. These people were used in an election. They are not able to now see the dividends of that use. They've now taken it to arms. It's not too late to quickly arrest that situation and don't let it go worse. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We don't negotiate with terrorists. These are Western statements. Are you going to also call yours terrorists when, in quote, it is the environmental challenge that led to that terrorism? They were not outsiders.
But you know, there's something that's at risk here. Government wouldn't want to appear to be weak.
Yes.
So if you talk about this dialogue and this negotiation, at what risk? You know, because the tendency is, okay, this one decided to carry arms and government is now listening to him. Okay, let's go group ourselves again and have another kind of agitation, carry arms. Government will listen to us. So are we not to be careful with that?
So it suggests to me that the now late Musa Yar'Adua was a very weak regime. But I want to tell Umaru, I want to tell you sincerely that dialogue is a very strong weapon to undermine an upheaval. Dialogue. It is not a sign of weakness. And in any case, there are strategies of dialogue. They call it CCC.
Carrot and stick.
Obasanjo's carrot and stick. When you consult, you consolidate on that consultation before you confront. Yes. You don't, if you are consulting, they are not ready to consult. You try to consolidate, they are not ready. Everybody will know that the government has tried.
Late Umar Yar'Adua did the same. I think it was a carrot and stick approach.
When you refuse to, you are government. After God is government, I say that again. But the people that are agitating need to see that there is a carrot being given. If you don't take the carrot, the stick is inevitable. That is not a sign of weakness. But when you go straight to stick, you create an ambience where other people go inward and start perpetuating wrong. That is not the point to get to. See, Niger Delta would have been worse off if not present for late President Yar'Adua.
Okay, let's talk about our judicial system in a democratic government. They play a very major role. Yesterday, I would say day before yesterday, we had the story of a jailbreak in Jos Plateau State, and it's not the first of it. We've seen that happen, and a lot of people have said, look, in fact, this is our jails. You have a higher percentage of people there who are awaiting trial, who have not been convicted of any crime, and all of that. how instrumental is the judicial system, and how can we make it more efficient so that it doesn't even become overwhelming, just like we're seeing now?
Our report captured that scenario you just painted. If you go to a typical detention facility, or what they call now correctional facilities, you see huge number. I think that our report said about 70% of inmates are awaiting trial. Whereas the law, when someone is arrested, within that jurisdiction, you present that person in court within 24 hours. That's what the law says. Or 48 hours if it's outside that jurisdiction. But in this context, when the police or whoever authority arrest an individual, the first thing is put that person behind their own bar. It stays there for 2 weeks or so. Then at some point, they go to get what we call the kangaroo papers, or I don't know what they call it, injunction, whatever they call it, and send that fellow to
FIR also, first information, whatever they call it.
To quickly just
legal violence.
Yeah, so that you don't blame them. They quickly go, arrest that from a magistrate or so, who signs that off, and then
to authorize the detention.
To legalize the detention. And the person who did that paperwork, a week, 2 hours later, has forgotten that case. There's another case on the table. That fellow in the correctional facility never get a voice. And that is a huge population. Those who were seen in crime areas. I would have been victim of one. I was found in a crime area, close to my own house. But I won't say it's luck. It was just privilege. The police had arrested me, thinking that I was part of. I said, this is my own car that I ran away from. It was like less than 200 meters to my own house. And the policeman told me that you're going to be thanking God, because this case is murder case. You would have spent your years in prison. And I imagine that for the countless number of young people who were found around those areas. The judiciary, first of all, is not the judiciary's fault, because most of these cases actually never get there. Again, it is the fault of the judiciary, because they have, there's what, I don't know what they call it, where, I forgot the name, where the chief judge usually go around facilities to hear cases directly and get people free. In my humble submission, everyone awaiting trial for more than a year should be set free. That will increase even
if it's a crime, I mean, a criminal case.
If it's criminal case, is it in court already? For 1 year, that should serve as deterrent for the poor pace of that legal issue. If somebody is actually involved with criminal act, sincerely found, but you know, in our jurisprudence, you are not guilty until found so. You are a suspect. A suspect behind bar who did an action that is contrary to the state, sincere one, and you kept that suspect a year without appearing in court, the judiciary should free them. It should not make the police work better. But again, you are going to, if you ask the policeman or the police side, let me flip up to I'm not a police officer, it will tell you, the cases are too much, we don't have the personnel.
To prosecute, yes.
To prosecute, and that becomes another challenge. So there must be some level of, I mean, we've set up a lot of agencies, pro bono organization, even government pro bono organization to take charge of those kind of cases, but it never really hasn't happened.
So is this purely a case of lack of personnel to prosecute these issues, or is it a problem of corruption? Because I see a scenario where there's a possibility to say, okay, we are going to put you in jail, except you decide to do something. And to do something, you know exactly what I mean.
There is a personnel challenge. It's true. There's also a corruption part. Because the corruption part would then be, you know, there are some police officers, they talked about how many arrests you have made. It enhanced your promotion level.
Profile, yeah.
And some police officers, during the days of Anini, the dreaded robber in Bender State at that time, we later heard that the policeman who was supposed to be like the chief of arrest was aligning with the Anini squad and eventually was arresting those who were anti-Anini squad, and he was earning himself a reputation. We know those, but I'm not too sure that exists now with the kind of police structure that we have. But that was a bane. It is not about corruption majorly, even though it's there. We won't rule that out. But the police number, how many police do we really have in this country? I'm told it's less than 400,000 for a population of about 200 something million. For what? In fact, in this country, And half of that number are with VIPs. Who does the prosecution? You go to a typical police station in Edo State 2 days or 3 days ago, in Isako area, a DPO was kidnapped. A DPO kidnapped. What's not the hope of a common man?
Now, if you look at the number of courts again, is that also a factor that contributes?
No,
to
there are
this
magistrate
congestion?
courts. They don't. There are again back to the personnel issue. The judges are also few. You get to court, the judge say, open up the file. He has about 150 cases to attend to. He's able to attend to 3. A court rise for the day, and if it's 2 months from today. These are human beings.
Let's talk about the symbol of democracy. You talked about the legislature, as very central to democracy, which is key. Over the years, in the last 20 years, what's your assessments of the legislative arm of government in terms of living up to its responsibilities? Because most of the cases or the issues today at the front burner, like these issues of agitations for, self-determination, the issue of restructuring, the issue of referendum and all of these are critical issues that are, before the National Assembly. What's your assessment of the impact of the National Assembly in the last 20 years in our journey to democracy?
I don't know this word, but I'm going to just say it. The legislature in this country has become hallelujah boys. They sing praises of the executive. They become almost like a rubber stamp, even though the current Senate president said they will not be rubber stamp. But we continue to see the dynamics flowing. They are not supposed to attack executive because they are all government. But they are supposed to play complementary role, but they are supposed to be on the side of the people. Right now, they are majorly on the side of the executive, no more on the side of the people. And the executive has also learned that if you starve them of fund, they'll be loyal. So you see time and time again, is either you push in money or you withdraw money. We know of a third-term bid that so much money went into the National Assembly.
The Ghana must go.
And the Ghana must go era. And before you know what's happening, there was a colossal damage. Until another Ghana must go came in to oppress that first Ghana must go. If there was if the second Ghana must go didn't come, apparently would have had a third term, maybe a fourth term, maybe what would have been like Nigeria and all of that. The National Assembly must truly rise up to the occasion. I agree with you. It is the National Assembly who should say that this part is marginalized. Supporting that philosophy and bringing it to the center. That was the idea. Bring all of the issue to a center point where we can have conversation. I have advocated before that Nigeria will never get it right until we are truly a federal state. Right now, Nigeria is a central government. Central Republic of Nigeria. There's no federal republic anywhere. The states are supposed to be federating states and not a state formed by the federal government. The way Nigeria is run, the states are formed by the federal government. So come to FAC. Let's come to FAC. Let's come and share the money. So if we all come into Abuja, commissioners of finance or whatever, they come in and they carry a big cutlass and cutting the cake and sharing that, metaphor. That is the bane of Nigeria. Because we are all going to Abuja, there's not complaint that the cake you took is fatter than my own cake. Whereas your state has enough cake to feed the people of your state, you can't see it because of the peanut you go to pick from Abuja. I'll give you a good example. Our neighboring state, Nasarawa, endowed with so much natural resources that will solve Nigeria's problem. One state. Kogi State, endowed. Everyone in these states, no state is poor. Up to Yobe, Jigawa. Whereas because of the analysis of the FEC, they say, no, these states are poor because of the money they earn from the federation account. Unknown to these governors are no longer interested in what they are standing on. Everything is 10 billion is coming this month. Okay, 10 billion. Okay, 10 billion. Or I will pay salary. No thought of how to utilize whatever comes from the center to develop what is underneath. Every state, I repeat, every state of this country has got something to add to the center. And that's what makes countries like the United States. We talk about the United States too easily. If you go to Kansas, for example, where you have oil and all of that, they pay royalty to the center. The resources is for them. Connecticut, one of the smallest states close to New York, by the side of New York, a small state. This federal government, we need to support that kind of state that has limited resources. You don't need to come to the center and share. Rivers and Co and all of the states that have oil, the federal government can take royalty from them and support states like Nasarawa to build its own base. What of Zamfara?
Now
the gold mine.
Now, to do that, you need visionary leaders. To do that, you need leaders who have the interest of the people at heart. All the things that you are talking about. Some people have faulted the recruitment process.
Yes.
Of emerging into political offices, and from 1999 to date, our electoral process. In your report, what were the things that you observed, and how can we improve the electoral process to make sure that only credible people, emerge?
By the time we move from the primordial culture now to the civic culture where people converge in Abuja, there was a change of orientation for many people. Election was not the only way to become rich. Before 1999, or immediately after 1999, those who were big boys of these cities were those who work in either Chevron, Snowbedger, these oil guys. But today, somebody comes to you and says he's a staff of Snowbedger. He's poor. You don't even, but somebody comes to you and says, I'm a councillor, representing, big boy. We've changed, our mentality has changed completely. The way our revenue mobilization and revenue fiscal sharing is happening has undermined the critical sector of this country. Then how do we improve our elections? Good news to the Electoral Act 2021 before Mr. President. I believe President Buhari will sign because he said he will give Nigeria a good electoral regime. Why is it going to be good? We have talked, there's been an argument about direct primaries, which is fundamental. People say, no, but they've been operating direct primaries. What happened? For example, in Anambra State, the guy who got 200 something thousand votes eventually scored about less than 4,000. Is it 40,000? Yeah, about 40,000 votes. 230 something thousand he got from direct primaries of his party. Scoring in the general election less than 50,000 votes. That's questionable. That is not the problem of direct primaries. It's because the people want to use direct primary to undermine the party. They know that if they use the indirect primary system, they may not get away with what they want to get away with. So they say, no, our party also do direct primaries. Let's do direct primaries. They don't do direct primaries in the manner that it should be done. The direct primaries is at the ward level. The ward chair have a responsibility to play. Each candidate will have agents across the ward. That's not what is happening. Lagos did the same thing. It was a scam where people just show up with a card at the gate. You allow them in, and the other person, no, go back. It was an avenue to say, no, you see, we run direct primaries. That's not direct primary. Direct primary system is giving every member of the party the opportunity to decide who they believe should be their leader. That's a selection process that will improve our democratic architecture. The way it is now, parties, there's what we call, in parties, they call it consensus. We have agreed. Option, yes. We have agreed. They will now go to the public to go and do indirect primaries. And say, no, we have done direct primaries. So meanwhile, people have been stepped down. People have bought their way. Yeah. That's not the system. And that's why the parties are crying. If the parties are crying, we should go for direct primaries. Because they know, if we operate direct primaries, only those that is on the will of the people will emerge in the general election, and then will become our leaders eventually.
Yeah, you talked about the institutions earlier on, democratic institutions. You talk about the role, being played, for instance, by the electoral umpire, the security agencies who are critical to electioneering process. How do we make them efficient, so that we can consolidate this democratic experience?
I'll take that from Anambra election. Very good. For the first time in our election, the civil society didn't have any problem with the security architecture, nor the army, not the police, not the civil defense, for the first time. In the same election that was supposed to be like a no election, Anambra, the police played by the rule. The rule of engagement was at the highest level. That is exactly the way to go. Good thing was that maybe because we have people in the hierarchy of the police who thought that you don't use the police to manifest in this direction. Unlike previously, a day to election, you see DSS invading the house of an opposition candidate and arresting them all. It didn't happen in Anambra State. In a Edo election, we saw it. Plain-clothed police officers, maybe DSS, maybe CID or whatever, but plain-clothed, invaded the house of a senior political officer, political actor, and arrested them. Arrested the court, bringing the morale of the supporters to naught. It's a strategy. It can be called divide and rule. Break in, scatter them. They will be disarrayed. Then the man you want to win will eventually emerge winner. If the police, we look up to equity. The police, the DSS, playing by the rule. The police have told us. Frank Uba had a meeting, CP, Commissioner of Police, this purpose to the police. 3 days before the Anambra election, there was a meeting he had for the very first time in the history of elections. A meeting with the civil society and critical media. Now, let's talk. What are the issues? One of the issues was human rights abuse. The police arrested people on election day. The police seen as an enemy of the state. And we had an agreement. And they said, okay, we will play our part. And sincerely, they played their part. We want them to play their part in Ekiti, play their part in Osun, play their part in the general election. It is possible. The police can actually play by the rule. If there is no invisible hand of demand and supply from the back, when that happens, I said before that the president appoints the IGP. If the president says, IGP, I want this to happen, and he says no, he had one option, to resign. If he doesn't resign, he must do the bid. If he doesn't do the bid, he'll be sacked.
Well, well, we have to end the discussion here. Very interesting discussion here this morning on the Democracy Watch report, how Nigeria fared in the past 20 years. And we have in the studio Austin Aigbe, Senior Program Officer, Center for Democracy and Development, the civil society organization that released that report. Thank you so much for coming. We look forward to having you again.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.